This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now. I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent. When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology, and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation.
I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless.
Good morning and welcome to the Leadership and Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Alex, who is CEO of Recorder. I stumbled there, Alex, and I suddenly went, is that your job title? And it's that classic thing, once you've got to know someone, you then go, I don't see you as a job title anymore, so sometimes I need to remind myself, but I think I got it right. Please correct me if I didn't.
No, that's entirely right. Thanks very much for having me on. I have the fortune or misfortune, as you might like to say, to be CEO of Recorder, which is a new broker management system for commercial insurance brokers here in the UK. We are essentially building the best of modern software for commercial insurance brokers to do their jobs more effectively.
Amazing. Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you for that intro. And look, there's so much to talk about, and I think we would have to be really careful with us because we've had a few wide-ranging conversations in the past. I do think it's really interesting, Alex, if you could introduce your background, because I think that sets a bit of context for the conversation we're going to have. Obviously, this is not your first rodeo, right? So you had a very successful business previously at Kodak, and some people will know that business, but it'd be great if you can give some context about that, probably the journey into the current role.
Sure, yeah. So Kodak was a business that I set up with a couple of mates, frankly, when we were in our mid-20s. We had been working at a online lender to small businesses here in the UK, and we had a basic business problem there of getting good enough data on the businesses we wanted to lend money to. So we said, well, hold on, these businesses run software to manage their finances. Why don't we just hook directly into those and pull the data out? So that's what we did. That business turned out to be a much better idea for a business than we thought when we were first setting it up. And so over the last 7 years, we grew it to about 350 people, big in the US and Australia, raised about $170 million from businesses like Shopify, PayPal, American Express, etc. And really, our core customers were lenders and payments businesses who were looking to pull data to make better underwriting decisions on their small business customers. And that logically always seemed like it would naturally fit with insurance. Exactly the same problem of how do I get better information to make better calls on what the risk looks like here. And so we had signed up a bunch of insurers as customers who had believed that this was an entirely correct thesis, and they were using our rails to try and get that information directly out of people's accounting packages. However, the adoption rates were always far lower than anything we saw in the banking or credit world. And that was always an odd piece to us. And our conclusion was essentially that there was a gap in the data pipeline between the small business who was looking to get cover and the insurer. And that gap was basically the broker. So we had failed to get the broker in and invested at any point in this process. So essentially, an insurer was sending out a link to random small business late on in an underwriting journey. Hey, do you want to share some data? And the small business perfectly reasonably was ignoring the emails. So what we did as a next stage was go and talk to a bunch of insurance brokers, say like, hey, we need to get you guys in on this journey. Carriers who are invested, they'd love to basically offer discounts and all of this for better access to their insured information. And the answer from brokers was really interesting, and set us on this path, which was essentially, yeah, we'd love this data. This is fantastic stuff, but I've got no way to get it into the systems that I'm using today. And so we took a look at the world of broker management software and a way to try and get data in. And yeah, it was really eye-opening about uh, some of the difficulties that brokers face in being able to use modern technology.
Mm, mm. I love that journey because I can imagine that conversation. And also, I'm definitely one of those small business owners that would have ignored that email from my insurer. Um, that's really good context for us because I know that we want to touch on a few things, but I think the big thing that you and I have really kind of had lots of conversations about is probably what does insurance look like coming from the world of fintech. You
Yeah.
were building better data pipelines. You were getting more efficient processes. The adoption was obviously big enough to lead to the success of your previous business. Then you enter this world of insurance, and what does it look like to you when you come in?
Yeah, it's a really interesting market because like I think as we discovered there, like so much of it looks very similar on the surface, right? It's
Mm,
a lot of people moving data around and arranging trust-based financial transactions with one another. So it should look very similar to banking. And I guess I would split it into the two pieces. One is the sort of nature of the market and the relationships themselves, versus the technology world. So maybe just to touch on the first piece, which is, to be honest, like one of the nicest sort of positive surprises that we could have had, which is everyone in insurance is unbelievably friendly relative to the banking world. It
mm,
seems that by the very nature of the business of risk and information sharing, people have a much higher natural reflex to move towards trust rather than distrust and oh, this is my secret piece of the market, you stay out of it type mentality, which
mm.
sadly is just much more pervasive in the credit world. I don't know if that's something that you have seen in
Oh,
this.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked in I worked in insurance, and then I've worked in insurance search for staggeringly long time now, 18 years. And but in that, I had little dabbles into fintech, finance. Usually when I was running teams and or growing a business, and I was like, right, I'm the point of the sword that goes into a new
Mm.
market. There's a reason why I've retreated from most of those
Yeah.
markets and sit within insurance because what I love about insurance is the sort of community aspect. It's staggering how much people will talk to you that you've never met. So you phone someone, go, "Can you help me with X?" And the classic thing in my world is, I don't think I'm letting out the secret sauce here. Is that if I need to go and find, the best reinsurance treaty underwriter that specializes in a particular class of business, I'll phone three, four brokers, and they'll tell me, and they'll
Right.
give an opinion, and they might not give their best contact, but they'll give their second best. But the point being is that these will be people that I obviously over the years I know some of these people now very well, but a lot of the time it might be someone I've never spoken to, and the willingness to talk has always surprised me. And then
Mm.
it's interesting when you get things like we're growing the team now, so we've just brought someone in from fintech and started working in sales. Her first three calls were like happened within 24 hours of her joining the business, and people were like, "What can I do to help? What would be useful?
Right.
You need to be introduced to my three friends over here." And that's just off the bat. So I've got limited exposure out, but when I have, I've retreated in and gone. I want to come to the lovely world of insurance.
Yeah.
Um, what's interesting about that, Alex? I suppose have you got any thoughts of why it's so different? Is it that risk sharing thing? Is that kind of like where it comes from? And kind of what has that meant in kind of practical terms from you building it? Because in many ways, if we're that collaborative, surely that means we should be further ahead as an industry when it comes to things like technology.
Yeah, and that is uh, an odd dynamic, certainly,
Mm,
because certainly the technology industry is, I would say, characterized in exactly the same sort of sense of open collaboration. Um,
hmm
but actually, in a very odd twist of fate, it feels like the technology side of the insurance world has been much more siloed,
mm,
and people are far more likely to try and build the systems themselves in house, for example, and
hmm
preserve it for themselves rather than saying, "Hey, we're open to using best in breed," and just sharing that. Public vendor with the rest of the market. And that has definitely been a major blocker in terms of speed.
mm.
I think a lot of people who have worked in insurance a long time have the sort of a lot of scars of tech builds that haven't gone quite right, and usually
Mm,
that is because they have been siloed internal efforts as
mhm.
opposed to a good vendor that is being used and backed by large swathes of the market. um, I have no idea why that is, to be
Mm,
honest.
mm, mm. I think something that I've always kind of thought about when I've thought about this and the culture of kind of building your own tech. Um, I think people used to think that was the USP. It's like, right, we can build our own tech and our underwriting. And I feel like now there's an acceptance though, no, the way that we think about risk, the way that we think about our data is what allows us to be a better insurance carrier company, etc. Um, and actually that software piece, yes, we've got to have a good customer experience, but ultimately there's more acceptance that when it comes to insurance, the insurance is the thing, and the underwriting profits are the thing, and there's less focus on saying, oh, we can differentiate ourselves by having this kind of this bespoke kind of inaccessible software
Right.
solution. And obviously that's in lockstep with the solutions have got better. So, what's the point? But I don't know. There just seems to be a slightly sort of changing attitude to saying, oh, actually, what we're really good at is this. So let's not do all these other things.
Totally,
Um,
yeah, and
mm,
we probably, to be honest, wouldn't have come into the market if we didn't have a sense that that precise element was changing. I mean, in enterprise software, people go on a bit of a journey on this buy versus build question, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think if we look at the example of the banks, um, 10 to 15 years ago, they were very much of the we should build things in house. This is part of our expertise. Why would we sort of allow that knowledge value to be dissipated to the open market? And
Mm,
now I'd say it's kind of flipped entirely the other way, where it is, hey, we should only build if there's no way we could possibly buy.
right.
But because the simple reality is you aren't the only people with this problem, right? There are many other players in the market who almost certainly have got exactly the same issue as you. And
Mhm.
if you have common infrastructure and instead, as a professional services organization, focus on that, really understanding what makes you better or different to other people, then you're getting a really good product outcome, and you'll be doing it on the back of technology, which is supported by everyone, and only getting better because more and more people use it.
Mm. I mean, I think Shopify is just a perfect example, isn't it? It's like you got to a point, it's like everyone's building their own kind of like shopping websites, and as a retail customer, I don't really care for it to be different. Like I just want it to look like most other shops, and I just want to be able to buy efficiently. And then obviously Amazon's changed the game because it's like if you can't deliver it in 24 hours, I don't want it.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I am one of those people. What do you mean it's going to take 4 days? Like how can I
yeah.
possibly wait 4 days? So
It's
yeah.
really interesting on precisely that, because I said Shopify invested in our last business, and I
Mm,
sat next to the CEO Toby at dinner, and he explained he ran a snowboarding shop, and he said, "Well, I wish that I didn't have to build." this Shopify thing and could just run the snowballing company, but there was no decent e-commerce software, so we had to build something on that. And I was like, that is like, he had to build it because he didn't have anything to buy, right? I loved that.
Accidental billionaire, not bad.
Yeah,
Not bad at all. How funny. Uh, Let's talk about cultural shock though, because that's a term you used when we spoke once. It was like cultural shock. And obviously, we're acknowledging it's different. How do you how have you adopted over that? How have you, and obviously you've got to know the market, but what are you doing to kind of deal with that kind of gap really? And you come from one culture to another one.
yeah. It's I have to say, I don't know how well we're managing it. Like, it's you never know. And it really is the same as any cultural
Mm,
shock of any sort, right? Like, joining a new school or like going
mm,
to a new country. It really is the same types of questions. First thing, obviously, is like, be humble, don't tread on other people's toes. Like, that is
mm,
blindingly obvious. In this particular context, it is presume that there's a good reason that the thing why something works the way it does,
hmm.
before going, oh, that's obviously bonkers. We should change that. Usually, there's a
Yeah.
good reason underlying it. The other piece is really just try and be as conscious as possible of that. Difference in culture, and make an honest effort to try and fit in. What we've done in our case is brought in someone that's our head of insurance to effectively be our guide through the world of insurance, and not just be our face to, in particular, insurance carriers, but also to change the culture that we have internally. So a bunch of the team have come out of the fintech world, and really her part of her remit is to make sure that we are moving to a more of an insurance-minded culture,
Mm.
and yeah, hope it pays dividends. But I think there still might be some moments where we go, "That's weird. That isn't the way we would have done it." In quite a
Yeah,
while from now.
yeah. But it is really the reason I asked that question. It's really different approach to what we had 5 years ago. We had lots of people turning up and going, particularly from fintech, but other tech sectors, and going, what you're doing is all stupid, and insurance is broken, and look, that message has died a death. I think we know that, but um, it's fascinating how many people turned up with that. And you think, I just love the arrogance of it. Of like to walk into like a 300-year-old industry and go, well, this is all broken. I'm thinking, well, some of it's probably all right. Some of it, they're pretty good at these things. Probably need some shaping on the edges. But I suppose that's part of your proposition as well, is you're working with the existing industry and saying there is this friction point in the middle where brokers can't deliver as they want to. And it is as they want to. I think when people sort of come in with the other attitude, it's to say brokers don't know that their software is not good enough. And what your story is, no brokers told you their software wasn't good enough.
They couldn't be clearer.
Yeah.
Like, the way I describe it. But entirely reasonably, they don't know what to do about it.
Mm,
They haven't been given an option before now, and really, that's all we're here to do, is say, hey, there is an option, which is basically we build you an open ecosystem. You want to connect to an additional data source, an additional workflow tool to make the internal system run faster. You have to do that on modern pieces of technology, which are like designed to hook into everything else, rather than constantly trying to retrofit some sort of static monolith
yeah,
of
yeah.
a piece of software. And that's something that requires working alongside people. Just on that previous point about people coming in and saying, no, this is all rubbish, this is wrong. Um, uh, there's a version of the history of fintech over the last 15 years, and you look at pieces like crypto is basically the tech bros from Silicon Valley rediscovering all the basic reasons why finance works the way it does. So it's like, oh, okay, we're going to, rip up the rules and have peer-to-peer investing. So I'm going to lend one person lend money directly to someone else, and then you realize there's a bunch of reasons why that actually doesn't work terribly well,
Yeah.
and you have trusted middlemen who can do this piece, right?
Mm.
In the crypto world, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to hold all my money personally in a wallet that I have. It's like, oh no, actually, there's a reason why we have banks and exchanges and all of these pieces to keep our money safe, and like probably we
Yeah.
should build those, and you just reinvent the wheel, really,
Yeah.
eventually on it. And it's a long and expensive journey. And so, saying, hey, what have these guys got right? First of all, is a great question, and also that gives you much more clarity on what they've got wrong. Right, the benefit of coming in from the outside, like us, is we get to take a holistic view, and we can say, actually, there's a better way to do this particular piece. You can't say that until you know how it all works.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, the crypto thing was making me smile. I was thinking people reinvent the wheel, and some of them end up in prison.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying bankers haven't gone to prison, and probably a few more should have done. But no, it is really interesting, and I think insurance is such a good example of that. When people turn up and said it's broken, it's like if anyone's good at being in long tail, because in a really bleak moment, I worked in a bigger recruitment business during the financial crisis, and I was working with insurance clients then. Our biggest client was AIG, who were in trouble, obviously, and we worked in a mixed financial services and insurance team. Financial services was disastrous, and insurance was relatively fine, because that's what they're built for. Like they are
right.
literally built to withstand risk. That's what they know how to do. So, the sort of even looking at that, I kind of want to point to people and go, no, these guys are just like the termites that will be here when the world is blown up, because
Right.
that's what we're designed for. So, it's working with the industry rather than kind of telling it what it's got wrong. But of course there are things to evolve, and I think that thing of like listening to what people tell. I mean, I think about this with all the time with what we do, and we didn't want to be a full-blooded search firm because we work with fast-growing software businesses that go, when I turn around and say, right, the research is going to take 6 weeks, and then we're going to take 6 weeks to do this, and then actually the whole process is going to take 4 and a bit months. It's just that my sort of software clients looking at me like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
But like, what works about that? What's the best bits of that? Because search is the ultimate luxury car, ultimate model of how you would hire someone, because it's perfect and you get it right and you explore the whole market, you map it, but what's a version of that that works? And that's what we're constantly working with. So it's like what works and what doesn't. Pick up the things that you need, and then also constantly question it, but
Mm.
don't go away from first principles. Mapping markets, deliver the best talent, and do it right. So, shameless plug for myself there, but I'll shut up about that. And it's the things that I thought were interesting as well is that we've got two types of people that listen to this podcast, which is generally insurance folk, and obviously really interested to hear what your broker solution, but also lots of kind of insurtech entrepreneurs. I think what's interesting about your journey, is that you've been through a really big scaling, lots of venture money, business, and you've come out of that, but you've decided to not go down that path. And I know you and the team have put your own money in, and kind of just wanted to understand, you know, lessons from the previous company. Why didn't you take venture money? Why have you decided to go this way? Because obviously you've got a track record, and every venture guy I talk to is like, you guys, they'd sign up and give you a check tomorrow because you've done it before.
Yeah. Um, yeah. It's an interesting sort of decision second time around. I mean, the like the fact of having had a good result the first time round does make that question a little bit easier. But still would rather take risks usually on other people's money rather than your own.
Yeah.
But the I would say the key consideration for us is being able to take the right amount of time to build a really good business. When you focus on really understanding who the customer is, right? why they work in a particular way, and why you're going to make their lives materially better with the product that you're going to build. And then you start doing it, and you do it increasingly at scale. Like the money absolutely flows like water in any business, and that is like irrelevant to any kind of capital consideration,
mm,
realistically.
mm, mm,
Like, this isn't a kind of big like capex project where you need like to build a factory, right? You know, we just open laptops and start writing code,
mm,
and if you can get to producing value for customers, actually you don't need to worry so much about how the capital side will work and fall into place. And we'd never say we wouldn't raise venture money. There may come a point when actually you need to build that factory, right?
mm, mm,
Or this particular version of it within the software world, or you have so much opportunity in front of you that you can't service it with existing resources. Like those things happen. But what I'd say is that's a far fewer the slice of the software world than the guys who are trying to give everyone the money would have, you believe, unsurprisingly. And most businesses, I think, would be best served by just not getting ahead of their skis
mm,
and just building in line with customer demand and servicing that.
mm. I, s- I think it's such an interesting thing to talk about because I think there's something in the British culture which is a bit more bootstrap or and then maybe in the future raise money. And we work US and UK predominantly, UK and Europe. And it is definitely a different culture with venture funding. Like you have to be further along to get some over here. US, not so much now, but certainly the last couple of years, you were able to go, this is my idea. We've built a sort of minimum viable product and then off you go. Um, but then also kind of like, particularly in insurance and insurtech, we've been having this kind of conversation constantly, particularly on the MGA model rather than software. But like
Mm,
going, it's a good business idea, deserves investment, but does it fit within venture, i.e., outsized returns, quick enough to sort of deliver for a portfolio that a VC needs? And a lot of it was probably going, probably not really, but it's probably a great business. And there was quite a few businesses that we talked about with venture going, it's a really good business, but it should have never taken venture money. It
yeah.
should have been a really good 20 million pound business, but we're trying to inject it to make it a £100 million business, which it isn't.
And the
Um,
incentive alignment in particular in that world is like really really tricky to do.
mm,
Like the seen it time again in the credit world. Like hey, let's relax our underwriting criteria to hit our investors return expectations. Like
mm, mm,
this is the sign that this is a business that has not got its head screwed on about
mm,
its priorities, right? But
mm,
it
mm.
happens time and time again because those return expectations will always come a knocking. And if you can find a way to do it without return expectations and instead just maintain really good underwriting criteria, like you will build a really good business. Like that's
Mm,
the tricky path through that.
mm. Yeah, it's funny. I was out with a friend last week, and he just exited his business, and he did pretty well. And but he'd come out of his earnout period, and he was
Mm,
talking to me about basically the horror show of doing that earnout window, which was totally. He was a business loan company, went into a very different environment, and the just investors just were not listening. And he was going, we need to change the forecast. And it was funny because they weren't hitting the target. And then they just kept bumping up the target the rest of the year. And he said,
yeah.
it doesn't work like that. I have to, like we can't just go, oh, we're just going to get more. It's like, no, the market conditions have changed, and actually, and it was really interesting. And he was having this great conversation with these sort of private equity guys, and it was kind of meaningless. And yeah, it was a frustration. So it's interesting to make this decision because I think the temptation is to go and get that money, and it feels like a lot of people like parade it as a win
Right.
that we've taken the money in the first place. And I was like, no, that's when the hard work begins. This is the, and like you say, there is a time and a place, and it's all of those good things. Like I got approached about some investment for my business, and I'm like, it's not really investable. Like it's a service business. It's based on the personality of my team. I'd love it to be investable, but I've gone into a bad industry for it. We're just going to have to take longer to get there, and that's
Right.
fine.
And uh, I would, yeah, the sort of even question that. So, does it actually take you longer to get there? Right? Usually, the for the same reasons as you say, it's not directly investable. Um, there aren't easy levers to pull. Like,
Mm,
I can't just put coins in at the top of the machine, pull the lever, and then out comes a bunch more. Right? Like,
yeah.
it's the money is not generally the thing that is going to make the difference. Like, in some cases, it does, and that's the
Mm,
times you should raise money from outside places. But yeah, usually that isn't the right answer.
yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Just on the time, moving on. There was something that I really want to ask you. Obviously, we've got a bit of a bias toward conversations about hiring. Um, you obviously scaled a big business. There was a hiring roadmap. Is there anything different you would do with the kind of maybe the priority order of people you brought in, or particularly around kind of like when you hired people and who you hired? And obviously, it's a different business, so I know they're not the same. But were there maybe some missteps you made in the last business that you wouldn't do this time?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that salespeople with domain expertise should
Hmm.
be the some of the very first people in through the door. Um,
Interesting.
they really help you build better products because
Hmm.
they give you direct customer feedback translated into like something actionable in terms of how do you build this into your product, and definitely they're transformative when you bring those
Hmm.
guys in. It's the other roles, I would say, also sadly hire people earlier than you really think that you can afford it, because certainly in my case they're a lot better at it than I am. So I think like everyone thinks they're okay with people, right? Turns out
Yeah.
actually no, leave it to the professionals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I've heard that so many times. It's like a really good ops person a lot earlier than you think you need, and that's what we've done. Like we're five, six people, and we've got a really senior ops person, and everyone's like, she's too big for our business. And I
Right.
was like, yeah, but I bought her for the business we're gonna be, and
Yeah.
so everything she does, like onboarding is seamless and everything happens as it should do. And otherwise, it was just me stumbling around an office thinking
Right.
I was good at it and
Yeah.
being generally awful at it, which is great. Uh, and so last question, and this is putting you on the spot a bit, and I hope you had a bit of time to think about this. I did put you on the sort of three bits of advice. Three bits of advice for a one of, because there's lots of like want to be entrepreneurs out there or people starting their entrepreneurial journey. Um, you've obviously been through it, doing it again, and they can be as trite or as funny or as complex as you want.
I don't think
Because
there can
the
be.
bet,
Is it? Yeah. They're certainly not going to be of any use to anyone. But yeah, I'd say the ones I can think of. The one is that I do actually tell people, when they come and say, "Hey, I'm going to do it," which is uh, be prepared to work extraordinarily hard. Um, is the only thing that makes a difference. People
mm,
often think that it's their clever idea or like the position in the market that's going to make it, and it's just not true. Like you just have to work harder than everyone else. Being
mm,
cleverer is really, really impossible.
mm,
Frankly,
mm,
you're almost certainly not cleverer than everyone else, but you can work harder than them. So do that. Um, yeah. The other one, really quite simple, is annoyingly be kind. Usually, someone reappears at some point later in your life, and
mm.
it's going to negatively impact your business way worse than you thought it would, than
Yeah.
if you've been kind the first time around. Yeah. Um, and then I guess third one is kind of staggeringly obvious, is just only hire people who are better than you. It always pays
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. You say staggeringly obvious. Obviously, I'm selfish about this one. This is my pain point. And look, I think the hard work and yeah, I'm blown away by things. Something I'll share with you is that I've tend I work we work with startups and scale ups all the time, the amount of time in these first kind of like 2 years, 1 year, I don't begrudge to people. It's important to have your mental health, but I'll speak to people that are going on holiday for 3 weeks,
Mm,
and I'm like, I don't know what that looks like, and I'm not. I just don't get it. I'm like, I don't get it, and I'm not going to demonize. Like, you've got to look after yourself, and there is a point where you need to take a break. And my team kicked me out of the office last week because they were like, "You're useless. Please go and
yeah,
take a couple of days off." And they were right, and I've come back charged up. But that thing is really interesting. But the hiring thing, and that money is a constraint, and I do understand it. But people making hires because they feel they need to make that hire, and so making a bad hire because that's the hire in front of them, rather than kind of like holding their powder,
right.
and then also being cheap. And it's like, you buy the best talent you can afford, and it hurts. And yes, and the classic thing is, yes, they might get paid more than you if it's your company. Like, the
Mm,
amount of times I get that thing where I go, "We've got a really senior salesperson. They want $200,000, but that's more than the CEO." And I'm like, "What's? I don't understand your point." It's
yeah.
like, yes, yeah,
What's
like,
your
yes,
issue? Like, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You own the company. They don't. That's their end. This is your end.
Also, aren't
And
they better at their job, which is more broadly rewarded by the market than you are? Like, if they're not,
yeah.
why aren't you hiring that guy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, exactly. It's like, and particularly in sales, and I think sales is always a bugbear. But it's like, look, if you're going to have to pay them more than the CEO, but they deliver the revenue, that's the purpose. You want people to either can build the thing or sell the thing, and those are the things that really matter. And the amount of kind of like, you wouldn't be cheap on engineers either. Like, why would you?
right.
Oh, we're gonna buy the most average software engineers we can build to get the
Yeah,
average product.
yeah.
Oh, but then when people know we've got the best engineers money can buy, oh, why do salespeople get paid so much? It's like, like, it's such a strange cultural element. It's very British, by the
It's
way,
very
and
British. Yeah.
working with both. It's like, that is the thing that we run into all the time.
Mm.
Um, anyway, Alex, I'm conscious of our time. It's been a pleasure. I always enjoy our conversations. So thank you for being generous with your time once again, and being a guest on the podcast.
No, thank you very much indeed, Alex.